Institutionalizing people, Canada's done that, and it had disastrous consequences. People in Barrie are struggling, and a lot of them just to make ends meet. To see the city decide to spend, tens of millions of dollars every year on an enforcement agency.
This is an election year for Barrie. Nominations for the 2026 municipal election are now open for the offices of mayor and city councillor. The questions of how money is spent, how communities are policed, and who City Hall listens to more important than ever. This is part of Simcoe Community Media's ongoing coverage of homelessness, housing, policing in Barrie, the areas where the largest share of the city's budget is spent. In the first of these interviews, we spoke with Michael Speers, a community activist and former candidate for Member of Parliament in the Barrie-Springwater-Oro-Medonte riding. Among the topics, we discussed the policing of homelessness encampments.
And that's mainly because of the narrative that the mayor has kind of led over the past couple of years in terms of, he described these people as dangerous. They don't belong in the parks. Parks are places for kids. They're for families. As if these people who are living in encampments were dangerous and were just out to get people, like they're the boogeyman or something like that.
The rise of rhetoric.
You see the mayor go right after people from outside of the community. He asked the chief about where these people that are coming in, doing these crimes, drug deals, smash and grabs, burglaries, things like that. Where are they coming from? And the chief, told me that they come from outside Barrie, usually from the GTA. I think is what the chief.
The city's own community poll on homelessness.
No, and I think that the poll was designed to kind of ensure that they got those results. We live in a very conservative community, who knows a lot of people who are reactionary in their thoughts in terms of not wanting to see homeless people, not wanting to see drug users, wanting to see encampments taken out of parks.
And the gap between enforcement spending and investment in mental health, addiction, and housing services.
Well, the one thing that jumps out at me is that it just reinforces the whole idea about how the police obviously just have an enforcement approach. If they know that there's 20 people who are supposedly causing most of the crime, why aren't we helping those people? Why aren't we giving them the resources and the services they need? Why aren't we giving them housing? Why aren't we giving them mental health supports?
This interview was conducted in early March before it became known that Edward Esu, a 29-year-old black man from Innisfil, was killed after Barrie police deployed a teaser. Esu was a passenger in a vehicle. The driver, a white woman, was alleged to be under the influence. His death has added urgency to the questions this interview raises. We will bring you voices from the black community on this issue soon. The release of this interview was delayed as we sought responses from Barrie Police and Mayor's Office on several outstanding matters, including in which a garage owned by an Indian family was burned. Police took almost 2 years to respond to our inquiry about it. After waiting for response, we also put questions directly to Barrie Police Chief Rick Johnston and Mayor Alex Nuttall at a community safety announcement event at Barrie Police Headquarters. There was pushback against Simcoe Community Media journalists asking questions beyond the scope of the event, but asking people in power questions they have not pre-approved is standard and necessary journalism. And that was 2 years back. Indian family's garage and car was burned, and I had to wait almost 2 years from police to get a response. And still, there has been no action taken. I know this process takes time. So these are the concerns. When it comes to
so I think that
we don't see the concern.
So I think that there's I'm not going to say those concerns aren't valid, and I don't know all of the concerns are or aren't valid, but I think there is an appropriate place for us to deal with that, which would be like when we're having a police board meeting.
As far as we could find out, that matter was never raised at Barrie Police Services board meetings or at any city council's meeting. Police took almost 2 years to respond to our inquiry about it. Neither the mayor nor the police chief fully addressed our questions on that incident, and we were cut off from seeking further clarification.
Next outlet, please.
There was another incident a few years back when a South Asian family was threatened in their own home. These two incidents came out to our attention through community forums and connections. We are not sure how many more such incidents have occurred in Barrie. Here is our conversation with Michael Speers. It has been lightly edited for length and clarity. Michael, thank you for joining me.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So the last budget, after the last budget, I think city has more than 250 sworn officer, 125 civilian members, total staff of 375. The approved budget now is more than 78 million, that is 8.5% increase over the previous year. I remember when this council first came in, and there was, I think the first budget was around, their first budget was around 8% increase. And then it was discussed that, this is the highest because it was the first time, and, going forward there won't be that much increase in the budget. So just, kicking off the discussion. So what is your impression of, the budget now is almost $80 million?
Yeah, well, it's like an absolutely ridiculous amount of money, and especially in a time where people in Barrie are struggling, and a lot of them just to make ends meet. People are struggling to buy food, heat their homes. To see the city decide to spend tens of millions of dollars every year on an enforcement agency that doesn't actually make our city any safer for anybody is absolutely outrageous. The whole idea of policing. I'm not going to go through all the history, but it was first started to basically to prevent. In Canada, it was to stop Indigenous people from staying on their land. So the police came to kick them out. It was to keep poor people and workers in line, to make sure that they weren't going after the ruling class's property. That's what policing is, and basically it's what it still is, right? They don't serve people. They serve they serve capital. They protect property, and so. The city's police force, and it's a similar situation around the country, as the police have become the default, basically social service agency, because other agencies don't have any money because all the money goes to the police. So the police are used to deal with wellness checks, mental health crises. Dealing with people experiencing homelessness, things like that. What all that leads to are things, like encampment evictions, crises around mental health that kind of that become violent, things of that nature. So, I've been an outspoken critic for years about the police budget, because I know there's a better way. I know that when you invest in the services and resources that people need, that is a proven method of crime prevention. There's lots of research, there's lots of examples about that. So, the city needs to prioritize. People say budgets are about priorities. So when you look at a budget, that's the priorities of the city. That's how you can kind of define what the city is focused on. And so when a city is giving this much money to the police, you can tell they're just focused on heavy-handedness, extreme enforcement of laws, discretionary policies that attack poor people and the homeless. So that money really needs to be given to agencies, other resources and tools that will actually help people. And when people get what they need, they don't commit crime. It's as simple as that.
One of the arguments, in favor of the police budget, the first came up, the crime in downtown. We see, drug addiction issues, mental health issues, and a lot of people live in downtown. Businesses and people need to be safe. So we need, more policing. There are police, walking around. Just in the afternoon I saw 3 police. So that is the argument in favor of, policing. And then we have seen in one of the meetings, a lot of businesses came to the meeting saying we need more policing. So what do you say about that argument?
Yeah, well, those people's concerns need to be addressed. So if someone's business, if they're finding that it's being affected by crime, that definitely needs to be addressed, but not through a heavy-handed policing initiative like we've seen in the city. You may see a bit of a short-term benefit, but at the expense of members of our community. people complain that they don't feel safe downtown. Obviously, feeling safe and actually, or feeling unsafe and being unsafe are totally different things. But I do acknowledge that someone's feeling of feeling unsafe. That's a legitimate concern. But again, like actually addressing the issues that these people are going through. Making sure if somebody is, if somebody is a drug user, making sure that they have a place where they can do the drugs safely, and then maybe, eventually they may want to go into some type of treatment program. We need to provide those types of resources and services to people, because that's a real long-term solution to make downtown Barrie and all of Barrie a safer place. Is to actually focus on true crime prevention by just throwing a bunch of money at more officers, having them downtown. I don't feel safe when I'm walking around downtown and I see a bunch of guys walking around with with guns and bulletproof vests and things like that. You can put shorts on them. I still don't. I still find it very uneasy. That to me isn't a safe downtown. Seeing all that, and seeing cruisers everywhere, to me that's not a safe. That's not a safe environment. To me, a safe environment is when I can see people getting the help that they need, being treated like human beings, not told just to move along, go somewhere else, things like that. I don't think that's a good way or a healthy way from the physical and also a mental, social, spiritual way of our city. That's not the kind of city that I want to live in. I want to live in a city that takes care of each other and doesn't point fingers at certain members of our community as being almost lesser than or undeserving of support, but instead of support, deserving of some strict enforcement. So, a lot of the crime that businesses, residents of downtown were experiencing could be addressed through their crime prevention methods other than policing, like the services and resources that I mentioned.
Yes, one of the things you talked about finger pointing. So being an immigrant to Canada, I've seen recently in the last couple of years, maybe especially in last year or so, a lot of online hate against immigrants, specifically in Barrie that I haven't seen before.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of discussion in various meetings, a lot of forums, pointing fingers at immigrants for a lot of crime. So that brings us one of the meetings that happened in I believe it was January 22nd, police budget meeting, and there were various items discussed. We'll get to that, but one of the items they discussed a few cases. Barrie Police Chief Rick Johnston talked about few cases. Few crime that happened and how police dealt with that. And two of the cases, one was 10-year-old child was found deceased, and I believe child's mother was arrested. Then another was some kind of robbery that happened, and the only topic that was discussed during the meeting was the robbery. And I believe Mayor Alex Nuttall asked the question, just one question. Where were the robbers were from, and I believe Police Chief Johnson said, they were not from Barrie. So, what is your opinion about discussion like this, where not all crimes are discussed?
Oh, well, obviously, it would have been nice for members of the board to display a bit of sympathy for the 10-year-old deceased boy. It was a tragic situation. Obviously, just devastating for the family. So, a bit of sympathy for that. But of course, you see the mayor go right after people from outside of the community. He asked the chief about where these people that are coming in, doing these crimes, drug deals, smash and grabs, burglaries, things like that. Where are they coming from? And the chief, told me that they come from outside Barrie, usually from the GTA, I think is what the chief described. And so, for the mayor to focus on something like that, I think just shows demonstrates a bit more about his us versus them mentality. That's how he governs. He's focused on the idea that people from Barrie, people who grew up in Barrie, they don't do those crimes. That the crimes that are happening, the people you see out on the streets are coming from outside. So we need to, it goes with this policy about trying to make sure that these people get sent to other communities, that get them out of Barrie, get them back where they came.
They also set up a fund in the past.
Yeah, back where they come from, things like that. That seems to be a bit of a trend in a lot of his arguments. So, not surprising that he would focus on an issue like that, and just like how he framed it, how it's he said how any amount of education that the police would never have stopped that crime because these people are coming in from outside of Barrie. So it really just emphasizes his idea of enforcement and the idea that that we need to have more police because these people are attacking the city from outside, and so we have to have our own kind of militia in place to make sure that the Barrie residents, people who are from here, and I've called this city home for a while, that they have kind of the safety and security that they deserve.
And another thing you mentioned was, if they make people who are using drugs, safe space to use the drugs. So couple of questions there is. First is, the argument is, if somebody is using the drugs, they don't belong in the city,
Right.
Because even Mayor Nuttall recently visited Alberta, and then in one of his videos he's talk about the Alberta's model of compulsory putting them in some kind of rehabilitation center, and Doug Ford also made a decision to close all the safe consumption sites. So the couple of questions. One is, the people who are using drugs, they don't belong in the city, don't belong in the street, they belong in an institution. So what is the argument against that?
Well, first of all, if you're using Alberta as an example of what you want to do, I think you have some major issues, because that's probably the most far right government in the country. So if that's what you're looking up to, then we have some problems. But in terms of institutionalizing people, Canada's done that, and it had disastrous consequences. And we've done away with that. We've closed all those, whether it's mental health facilities, facilities for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, drug treatment facilities, like forced treatment facilities. Like, Canada's gone through that. We saw the harm that caused, just irreparable harm to thousands of people. And that's why as a society we decided to go away from that model and integrate people in the community and give them the services that they need. But for so long, since neoliberal policies have kind of dominated our political spectrum, obviously services have been cut. They continue to be cut. They continue to be privatized, profited off of. So that there aren't the services that are available to people. So to mandate someone for treatment, people who want treatment can't even get treatment in our province because of the lack of funding for drug treatment and mental health facilities. So if you can't even get people who want treatment, the treatment that they need, talking about mandating it for a certain portion of the population doesn't really make a lot of sense, unless you're talking about prison, which I suspect that they are talking about. I think Doug Ford, he's mentioned the idea about expanding prisons, which I'm sure he would love to do. With that comes privatization. Then you're just institutionalizing these people just to get them off the streets, which I think a lot of our politicians would be in favor of. So again, we've been there, didn't work. We moved on to a more humane holistic kind of community building approach. It just needs the funding and the resources to make it work. But again, when your number one funding option is the police, and you expect them to deal with a lot of these issues, you're not going to have the funding available for anybody else.
But another thing is not so long back, now how we are now talking about hard drugs. People used to talk about alcohol, during 1920s, 30s, and even marijuana, few years back. But now we see in downtown Barrie, a lot of other stores are closing, and we see a lot of marijuana dispensary, and we don't see that kind of talk against the marijuana anymore. So what does that tell you about the society in the way of once something is legalized, it's then big businesses come in, and there's a profit center, and then that no longer demonized.
Yeah, anything that's been commodified and supported by government no longer becomes demonized, right? If big business can make money off of it, then governments decide to take their hands off, whether it is alcohol, marijuana, gambling. We've just seen all that explode over the years, without thinking of the cost to society. But yeah, like people, like when you debate the idea of a safe consumption site, people come out saying, "Oh no, we don't want to give a place for people to do drugs. They shouldn't be doing drugs." But they don't actually realize that the biggest safe consumption site industry in our country today is the alcohol industry. There's safe consumption sites all over the downtown right now, right? You can go have a beer, a shot of whiskey, glass of wine, and downtown. Like that is a safe consumption site. It's a place where someone that wants a drink can go and get a drink. And so governments have decided that that's okay because there's money to be made off of it. But they've made a judgment call that that's okay. But someone who's using harder drugs, injecting themselves, smoking something that's illegal. These politicians have made a moral judgment that that's wrong and that that shouldn't be supported. They're ignoring, the health evidence. They're ignoring the fact that these safe consumption sites keep people alive. They focus on the fact that, these people should just be going into rehab, getting the treatment. But you can't go into rehab. You can't get treatment if you're dead. So these safe consumption sites are set up to keep people alive, and then they can make the choice of whether or not they eventually want to stop using drugs. But it's to me, issues like that are a real barometer about how someone thinks and what their priorities are, and who they think values in our society. And a lot of our politicians value, the everyday just taxpayer, works 9 to 5, pays the bills, goes to the Colts game, things like that. Like that's who they're focused on. Where other members of our community that may be struggling, kind of don't get that support that they need.
So getting back to the police board meetings, you have done number of deputations in the past in front of City of Barrie, in front of police board, about police budget. So the first meeting of this year, the entire board was re-elected. Even I'm not sure. I reached out to the police chief about other issues, other questions. I haven't heard back. But even these are 5 board members. 3 appointed by city, 2 city councillors, including mayor, 1 community member, and 2 appointed by the province. And then the entire board kind of nominated each other and re-elected the board. So what do you feel about the election process, the transparency when it comes to the police board?
Well, I was on record last year, calling for new leadership on the police board. I think, I think they've demonstrated that they have no other way of thinking about issues except throwing money at a problem. Increasing enforcement, that seems to be all that they're able to do. They don't see a bigger picture. They don't see how the idea of giving a law enforcement agency tens of millions of dollars a year and huge budget increases like we saw last year, they don't really understand how that looks. They don't understand how that sucks money away from other resources. So they seem to have been there for quite a while. And to me, it's time for a change. I'm not naive though. Obviously, the police board is made up of the mayor, another councillor. We have a very conservative law enforcement focused council, so there's not going to be much change there. And the community members are appointed by the province. Province right now is a conservative conservative government, so that's what you're going to get. But yeah, they say the same things, they do the same things, they don't change their attitudes, they don't tend to look at any research in terms of other crime prevention tactics, as far as I can see. They stick to their ideological goals, and I would love to see a police board actually kind of be open to more ideas. I know the initial police ask back in the fall was even more money, and it kind of got chipped away at the board level. I suspect though that was just purely optics. I think that the police board, they encouraged the police to come with a really high ask so they can knock some money down, so it looks like they're actually listening to the taxpayer. I think that was all smoke and mirrors. So I don't have much faith that they're ever going to change their ways and do things differently, but that's not going to stop me from speaking up and telling them how I feel.
February 9th or 19th meeting, they discussed the statistics from the last year. So Barrie police handled over 80,000 calls for service. Only 12% were actually criminal in nature. Rest were noise complaints, traffic stops, ambulance assist, etc. And then maybe 9,000 of total calls resulted in 7,000 charges, and those were concentrated among 2,000 people. Mm-hmm. And less than 1% of those, so less than 20%, individuals were responsible for 20% of total harm in the city. So this is very interesting statistics, given the big police force we have it comes down to the less than 20 people and it seems, I'm not sure, but it looks likely that police might be aware of those people, that those 20 people, if they are responsible for large number of crimes. So what does these statistics tell you about the nature of crime and policing in the city?
Things like that. Like if those are the people that are committing the crimes, instead of targeting them for enforcement, let's actually help them. And I think you might be surprised at the results if you actually give people the help that they need. When I saw the 12% of calls, only 12% being criminal in nature, I've seen stats like that before, and it always kind of makes me kind of chuckle in a way, just because it just makes me shake my head that we're giving these millions of dollars for law enforcement for when most of the stuff they're dealing with has nothing to do with crime. And it kind of reminded me of just before that meeting. I don't know if it was preemptively, but the police sent out a press release. I saw it posted on the website just out of the blue. right before the police board meeting, talking about all the other stuff the police do that's not crime related, which basically I'm going to print off and maybe just read at my next deputation, because they're kind of making the argument for me in that the police they're not designed to deal with these issues. The majority of the issues that police have to deal with, right? They're not designed to deal with mental health calls and other other situations that don't require armed law enforcement. And even in that press release, there was a line that jumped out at me about how all these calls were not preventative in nature, like they're not for crime prevention, or their law enforcement wasn't the priority goal in these calls. And it just makes me wonder why we're sending armed law enforcement agents out to these calls then. And that kind of it goes with the crime stats. Like, why are we like why do we have these armed police officers going to all these calls when they could be better handled by social workers, by mental health workers, by street nurses, street doctors, things like that? Those are the people we need to be investing in. We need to be putting tens of millions of dollars into them, and not the police, because the police admit that most of what they're doing isn't actually in any type of law enforcement capacity. So, the stats kind of speak for themselves. Another stat I think that jumped out at me was I think 20% of all of the charges laid were failure to comply, which is basically an administrative charge where someone failed to show up to court or something else like that. And a lot of those are obviously they're targeted people that the police are looking at. Like, it's a discretionary policy that the police have put in. They're kind of it's like a systemic kind of bias towards people living on the streets, drug users, people like that may have committed a crime, gone to court, been released, but they have to go back. They may forget about their court dates. Just from what we've heard on the streets is that police have, they've started to kind of crack down on that, and they're showing up at places, at the Busby Center, at other places, and checking on these people proactively to see if they have these outstanding charges, and a lot of them do. Obviously the result of that is that a lot of people experiencing homelessness may decide to shelter, go off somewhere else, a little bit out of the public eye. But that just means that they're away from the services that are going to keep them alive and support them.
But I think the police chief's argument was this is a way to help them, because so they don't miss the date. So if they are proactively going, talking to them, letting them know that this is the date they should show up at the court, so they can be safe from being arrested. So I believe that was
right, and I think that's the chief not understanding how people view the police. People who have been abused by police in the past, people who have been harassed, feel threatened by the police. They're threatened by law enforcement agents, and so to them this isn't a service that the police are doing. This is the police deliberately targeting a segment of the population, basically the result is that these people stay away. They're away from services. They're away from their community, and that's a dangerous situation for people to be in. Not only because we had a really cold winter out in the elements. Obviously, there's dangers there. But if someone's using drugs, for them to do that on their own in isolation is very dangerous. They should be with their community. They should be able to, to form supportive communities where they can. If there's a lack of housing, then they should be allowed to be with a community without being harassed by the police. And
then one of the issues I think police chief is passionate about stopping intimate partner violence. So he's talked about roughly 63% of the calls result in charges, but he didn't mention, but for some reason they don't charge conviction data, and he acknowledged the gap in that. So isn't this kind of crime where police can be helpful when it comes to intimate partner violence?
Well, obviously, if you're only kind of tool in the tool belt to deal with a terrible crime like that is policing, then I guess yes. Again, we don't look at at the kind of society that we have that would lead to so many incidents like that. Like, what are we doing to protect women or any type of partner? What are we doing to protect them before these incidents happen? The police, and I've made this argument before. Police don't prevent crime; they just show up after it's happened to deal with it. And that's the chief acknowledging that, I think, to a certain extent, is that intimate partner violence is it's something that we need to get a handle on and figure out ways to deal with it before it happens. When policing just deals with it after the fact. Again, it's an enforcement approach instead of an approach where we can figure out why these things are happening and what we can do as a society, as a community, to make sure it doesn't happen anymore.
So just the last question about the homelessness poll that city conducted, community telephone poll on homelessness. They asked 5 questions. I will just read the questions quickly. Do you support the city's additional investments to address homelessness and encampments in Barrie? Do you agree with the city's approach to removing encampments as long as people living there have been offered shelter and support? Or maybe you want to go one by one, or you just read the question?
Yeah.
Simcoe handles social services in Barrie. Do you think the county should do more to address homelessness, addiction, and mental health? Do you think the city of Barrie's budget balances community services with keeping tax increases low? And do you support city council's investments in policing security and reducing crime in Barrie? So what do you think about these questions? Because city did really well. They polled 1,000 residents, and most of them had very positive things to say about this.
Yeah, like that's kind of what the city does, right? They have these surveys that come out, and they polled. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of people, but in a city of 150,000 people, asking 1,000 of them what they think isn't really a big segment of the population. Am I surprised that the city got the results that they got? No, and I think that the poll was designed to kind of ensure that they got those results. We live in a very conservative community. There's a lot of people who are reactionary in their thoughts in terms of not wanting to see homeless people, not wanting to see drug users, wanting to see encampments taken out of parks. And that's mainly because of the narrative that the mayor has kind of led over the past couple of years in terms of he described these people as dangerous. They don't belong in the parks. Parks are places for kids. They're for families. As if these people who are living in encampments were dangerous and were just out to get people, like they're the boogeyman or something like that. And so yeah, like those questions are, they're very simple. They're they're like very kind of one level type questions, like, do you support the investments in helping homeless people? Well, sure, of course, everybody supports any investment. We definitely need more. Do you support the encampment evictions if people were provided with a shelter? Yeah, of course. But what kind of shelter? Is it long-term shelter? Is it just is this a bed for a couple nights and then they're back on the streets? Do these shelters respect a person's charter rights, things like that? So that kind of stuff wasn't a part of the survey. And so I guess I'm not surprised by the results. It's kind of, like I said, it's set up for the city to do really well, to get a lot of people to support. And you know, and I think that's I think we need to do a better job maybe of educating residents about the harms that policies that the city have brought together, the harms that they're doing to people living in our community. And I know some people don't think that certain parts of our, or certain members of our community, people don't think that they deserve to be treated better. They think that there are others, and our politicians cater to one segment of the politicians at the expense of others. But I think at the end of the day, our politicians have to do what's right for everybody in the community. You can't govern based on polling or surveys. So the survey supports the efforts of what the mayor and his people are doing. Does that mean that's the right thing to do? I don't think in a democratic society that's necessarily how you govern. You have to govern for all, not just for one segment of the population.
Thank you so much, Michael.
No problem. Thank you.
For Simcoe Community Media, I am Deepak Bidwai. This story was supported by the Local Journalism Initiative.